welcome. I'm Michelle Marchant Johnson with Love Life Coaching, and I am here today with our Man of the Month, P.J. P.J. is a dear friend of mine. I love him, and he's so inspiring and has so much wisdom to share. I know you're going to love him too. So welcome, P.J. So happy to have you here.
Super great to be here. Thank you so much. You look beautiful as always. And I'm really, really honored to be in your presence and the presence of your audience. And what an incredible honor to be invited to be the Man of the Month a second time.
I know. Isn't that so great?
It is.
And,
it is.
you know, I love doing this because I love being able to feature the wisdom of some of my favorite men out there to help women, which is the vast majority of my audience, understand more about life and love and relationships. And with PJ, I feel like we could interview PJ 100 times and still not tap into all of the wisdom. So I always consider it such an honor and a privilege to connect with you again, PJ. Thank you so much for being so generous. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And what a nice compliment. I really appreciate that. You know, I think one of the really important things about these Man of the Months that you do is it gives the women that are your audience and your clients the wonderful opportunity to see that there are really good men out there, right? And so it creates this sense of hope when there may otherwise have been some little bit of sneaky hopelessness working its way into their psychology.
So true. So true. So well said. And that's a lovely intention behind what I'm doing as well. And I want everyone to make sure you stay till the end because PJ has a wonderful free gift for you, which I am so honored because I know PJ created this free gift specifically for my audience. And it's very generous and very robust. And I think you're going to love it. So you're going to want to stay till the end so that you can be sure to get that. And also, I have a link in the description, and it'll be underneath the video as well, that you can go right to it and get that from PJ. And then you can also check out the free gift that I always have up on my channel and for all of you, which is called 10 Secrets Every Woman Needs to Know About Men. So we're here.
I feel like I should read that to make sure that I'm falling into the right categories there.
I think you'd like it. I think you'd find it fun to read. So with that, I want to give PJ just a little bit of a formal introduction, and then we're just going to jump right in because I really want to hand the microphone over to PJ and let him take it away. But I do want to introduce you officially and let you know just a little bit about my amazing friend. PJ is an international speaker and resiliency expert, teaching people to embrace and live the resilient way. He has delivered more than 4,000 presentations in his lifetime and is considered one of the world's leading authorities on overcoming obstacles. PJ will tell you a little more about some of that. PJ has been seen and or worked with people in more than 35 countries. Despite his disability, which was expected to take his life by 7, he chose to live and live well. PJ truly lives an extraordinary life, sailing, outdoor skydiving, indoor skydiving, trapezing, ziplining, hiking, mountain climbing, snow skiing, water skiing, aquajet packing, and the list goes on. He's a former wheelchair athlete, international traveler, founder of 2 nonprofit organizations and 4 disabled sports programs, a published author, watercolorist, and acrylics painter, 10th degree black belt, martial arts and women's self-defense instructor, and a meditation teacher. Additionally, PJ has been inducted into the National Hall of Fame for People with Disabilities, awarded the Distinguished Golden Dragon Medal from the International, help me with this word,
Bujinkan
Dojo, recognized with the extremely rare Communication and Leadership Award from Toastmasters International, and was nominated to carry the Olympic torch through Tucson in 2002. And now he's our Man of the Month.
Ta-da! It's so crazy. Like, thank you so much for reading that. That's so nice of you. It's just, when you hear your own bio, like, we want to live in a way that is impactful and fun and exciting and making a difference in the world and leaving a legacy. And then as we do it, it's a great experience But then when you look back and you hear all the things that you've done, even though, this is my bio, I know what it is. It's sort of one of those things where you're like, ooh, I hope that doesn't sound like I'm bragging, but these are just the things that I've done because I wanted to live at the highest possible level. And I wanted to have the greatest influence and impact on people that I was connecting with.
Yeah. And you know what, PJ, one thing that always stands out for me when I read your bio or sections of your bio is the part where it says you chose to live and to live well. And I think that is actually a choice in so many ways, the choice to really live and to live well. And so that's what I believe your bio represents, is that choice to live and to live well, despite challenges, despite obstacles, despite whatever might have stopped you from living that kind of life. And though our circumstances vary, we all have those quote unquote reasons not to live or not to live an extraordinary life.
Yeah, I believe that there are two kinds of people in the world. I believe there are free people and slaves. Eek! Oh, it's a little provocative, right? I believe that slaves are people that live out of a moment of reaction. So I don't think that people are always a slave or always free. I think there are moments of slavery when we experience a reaction, because a reaction is a slave action. It's not something that we on the conscious level do or think or say, right? It's something that the unconscious mind creates or causes us to do or say. And then all of a sudden later on, the conscious us often winds up having to go back and clean up the mess. So we can either be a slave because reaction is a slave action. So meaning we can experience and witness and interact with the world, react with reactionarily, if that's a real word, from a reaction, or we can consciously choose to respond. And when we consciously choose to respond, we're responding because we realize that we have choice. And if we have choice, that means there are opportunities available. So anytime there's choice, there's freedom. And so the problem is that most people don't understand that you always have choice. Unfortunately, so many times people just live based on the reaction of what their brain does, instead of stopping and saying, let me assess the situation and identify how I want to show up. What's my integrity in this moment?
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's such an important point that we often forget about the fact that we do have choice, even under what circumstances that might seem otherwise. We do have some choice. Yeah. And we can forget that. And we can feel like we're just being acted upon by life rather than choosing how we're going to respond. Yeah. And then usually when we are reactionary, that's not always based in our highest and wisest choice-making centers. It's not often coming from that place of what is the truly best for us. That's often where we find ourselves in regret.
Yeah, 100%. When it comes from reaction, when any kind of response, whether it's verbal or physical or emotional response, comes from reaction, so often, probably like 98% of the time or more, it's coming from a place of self-preservation. You're just trying to defend yourself, or that part of your brain says, ow, that hurt, we're going to bite back, right? And the problem is that in when we were cave people, I was great. Saber-tooth tiger, let me react to save my life, let me react to save my baby's life or my partner's life or my friends or whatever. Let me do that to make sure that we're all safe. However, in the modern world, when it comes to relationships, whether you're just dating or you're in a long-term relationship, if you allow reaction to be how you interact with your partner, that probably is going to hurt the relationship. I always say that couples must recommit to reconnect. And what do I mean by recommit? I believe that resilience is born from commitment. So when you commit to a way that you want to be, when you commit to how you want to interact with that person, when you commit to a particular level of love and support and loyalty, when you commit on these areas when you commit, period, resilience is born, and it gives you the power and the authority that you didn't have when you were in reaction mode. Because resistance to anything that might feel like it's scary or bad or hurtful, resistance just causes suffering. Resilience remedies that suffering. And resilience is born from commitment. And couples need to recommit to reconnect.
Recommit to reconnect. So to me, it sounds like, PJ, we're talking about a couple of commitments here. One is the commitment to who you are going to be, kind of that commitment to your higher and best self, the commitment to the responding self rather than the reactionary self. And it also sounds like you're talking about a commitment to the relationship, to the other person, to loving, to choosing the path of love, rather than assuming the worst or being assigning sinister motives to whatever your partner may or may not be doing, or choosing to react in a way where you're shutting down or closing off the communication or the connection. Sounds like we're committing in ways that are deeper than just kind of what we might typically think of commitment in a relationship.
Absolutely. And really, we could boil it all down to the commitment to your own authenticity, right? Authenticity is the noun. It's the who you are. It's the noun. It's the who you are and what you are at your core. Integrity is the verb. Integrity is that authenticity in motion. And so if you just commit to what's really right and true in your own heart and how you want to show up in the world, the rest of it will start to take care of itself, because you're the first. You are the foundation where all of your expression comes from. And so if you're true to that authenticity, if you know who you are and where you want it, how you want to show up and how you want to communicate with people, the rest of it will just naturally open up in a way that doesn't make you feel like you have to go back and clean up the mess, because you'll be able to look at something and say, I did this from my heart. I did this with kindness. I did this with real intention. I did this because I wanted this person to understand. If we're in reaction mode, it's going to feel gross, right? And we're going to feel like, we're going to ruminate. Our mind is just going to go over it and think about it, because the unconscious mind in that particular case is trying to resolve the situation. But the unconscious mind's job isn't to resolve it. It's the conscious mind's job to resolve the situation or the problem or the issue. And as long as you move with that integrity, then you won't have to worry about resolving very much at all in your life, because things will naturally work out the way that's right for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, though, just to kind of go a little deeper with this, and I want to hear your wisdom on this, is for those of us that feel like we've done a lot of our own work, myself included, for example, and yet we still can find from time to time something that really triggers us, things that kind of surprisingly trigger us, right?
Yes.
And maybe we do react instead of respond. There are times for me where I feel like, I'm doing really well. And then all of a sudden there will be something that will trigger me surprisingly. I'm like,
Yes.
wow, I'm surprised that triggered me so much. So how do we have self-compassion for, first of all, when that happens? And how do we even begin to evolve past that? Even if we feel like we've done a lot of our own work and have a lot of awareness, and we're not usually reactionary, but we all of a sudden find that there are triggers, because I think this happens a lot in relationships.
Yeah.
It happens a lot in our connections with other human beings. And
Yes.
One of the things I've learned in being in a long-term relationship, having been married to my husband now for 16 years, is it's kind of like when you're in an intimate relationship, it's kind of like having a mirror reflecting back. And there are parts of you that you kind of go, wow, I didn't quite know that was there. Or I thought that I had kind of taken care of that. That was a lot there, but go where you want to go with that.
I think this is a really important question, and one that I'm going to close my eyes for a minute, because you've heard me say this before. I want it to come through me instead of from me. So there's no particular order in what's going to come out. I just want the wisdom to come through. The first thing that comes to me is that, how do we have the forgiveness and the compassion for ourselves when we react and we're like, why did I do that? Remember that the only way that would ever occur is if you were already moving forward, or the relationship is moving forward. If the relationship was stagnant, there'd be nothing to fight about, right? If your connection with somebody just there was nothing being given or received, I mean, you might fight about like, hey, I'm not getting anything. But if they don't respond, then there's nothing there. So when we move forward, we're going to bump into obstacles, right? And this is important. I want you to realize that if you're bumping into obstacles, what you're doing is you're cleaning house, right? So if I start in the kitchen and I dust in the kitchen or whatever, that doesn't mean the living room is now dusted, right? It means that I've finished the kitchen. Now I get to move on to another area. So when we do the self-work, we're working on a particular area. And then as we move forward, as we advance in our life, as we allow ourselves to get more intimate, as different kinds of circumstances arise in our life, we find a new recipe that might cause us to bump into something. We go, "Ooh, eek! I didn't know that was there." So instead of beating ourselves up, I look at it in this particular way, that I'm moving forward, and all of a sudden, a chain or a rope that's attached to the anchor of my past goes taut and pulls me back into the past. You may have heard me say this before, that the door to your remarkable future is in your past. What does that mean? Think about your past as an anchor, a big ship anchor, a giant ship anchor, bigger than you, dug deep into the ground, right? And only part of it sticking out. And what is attached to a ship anchor? Ropes or chains or some kind of line, right? So think about that rope or that chain linked into a part of your emotional state, part of your heart, a part of your physicality, part of your psychology. And you're like, okay, that's what I want. That's where we're going. The relationship is moving this direction. Boom. And all of a sudden you start running and boom, the line goes taut, the chain goes taut, and you get jerked off your feet and pulled into the past. And there's the reaction that occurs there. But what this is this is the unconscious mind saying, hey, that's the direction you wanted to go. And because that's the direction you wanted to go, I let you move in that direction as far as you were free to move before this thing that arose needed your attention. And so it's the unconscious mind's way of saying, hey, we've got a little unresolved stuff here. So let's clean this up so you can move forward and feel freer after we let this go. Because letting go is the first key in the resilient way. And being resilient, key number one is you want to let that crap go. The unconscious mind is, it just rambles and rambles and rambles and goes on and goes on and goes on and ruminates and ruminates and ruminates and talks and talks and talks, and it's incessant and it just doesn't ever seem to stop. And sometimes we just want to say shh to it, right? And I also call the unconscious mind it. So I want to say shh it, because sometimes that's all it gives us. Shit. Sorry for the language, right? But it just gives us some crap that we have to deal with. But what it's really doing, it's actually acting as your best friend saying, hey, I want to support you and I want you to get over there. I want that relationship to be exactly what you want. And this reaction that's arising in you is just something that you might want to go back and clean up so you're a little more free to move forward. So instead of feeling like, oh, like, why am I doing that? I'm so upset with myself. Instead, come back and be like, okay, let's look at this. Why are you acting like that? If a child starts to misbehave, we can get angry and upset with it, and it just continues to be upset. Or we can sit down with it and say, baby, what's wrong? Why are you sad? Because I want this and I'm not getting it, and whatever it is, right? As soon as they're able to express it, we're able to understand it, the emotion settles. And it's the same with ourselves. So if we can be tender and kind with ourselves when these kinds of things arise, then all of a sudden the tenderness and the kindness reveals what's actually going on. And then we get to figure out how to untie that chain or that rope that's attached to the anchor. We don't untie it from the anchor. Let it stay connected to the past, but we untie it from our own psychology. We unleash it from our own heart. We release it from our emotional state, from our own body. And once we go, okay, I don't need this anymore. This isn't serving me. I can set down that chain or that rope. And now I've got the freedom to move forward again without the weight trying to hold me back.
Mm-hmm. So beautifully said.
Okay?
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think it is important for us to be able to get to that place of self-compassion, have compassion for ourselves as well as others when we have these triggers or we have these less than ideal moments in how we show up, because we're evolving, we're growing. I like your analogy that it's, something kind of pulls us into the past, that can be a trigger, but it's also that indication that we're moving forward, or else there would be no pull back.
That reaction would never have happened if you weren't moving forward.
Right. So that's very powerful to recognize. And
I think, can I add one little piece to this?
Sure.
It's really beautiful when you realize that you still have innocence available to you. And so when you do something that you're like, oh, let me rephrase it. When your unconscious mind causes you to react in a particular way, and you, the conscious, you have to go back and clean it up. And you're like, oh, why did I do this? You didn't do it. Your unconscious mind did it in preparation to protect you and to serve you. Okay. So don't judge yourself from why did I do that? Instead, think, okay, well, let me be kind to myself. Let me reestablish the sense of innocence and really explore, because when you're innocent, you're not hiding anything. And this is important for discovering, like, oh, well, this is why I was bothered by that, because whatever, it links to some problem in my past. And I always say that when couples struggle with each other, they're not really struggling with each other. They're actually struggling with each other's baggage. They're actually struggling with each other's past. So if there's a difficulty within a relationship, I'm not upset with my wife or my husband, right? You're not upset with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You're upset with whatever their past is bringing up and throwing in the road right now. And you're not even upset with that. You're just confused, like, wait, what's going on? This is a complete shift and a change. So instead, if we just shift into a space of innocence, innocence is curious. Innocence is non-judgmental. Innocence is tender. Innocence is completely open with no shadows. It just reveals itself vulnerably. And so in that way, when we look at ourselves in that way, we're able to look and say, oh, this is what's bothering me. One of the ways that I do that first is I physically relax my body. You may even see my eyebrows will go up, because that initiates my process. Like my eyebrows will go up. I'll relax my face. I'll relax my neck, my chest, my back. When I do that, I'll take a deep breath and I'll just let myself sit in that openness, that sensation, and the exploration psychologically. It's just a conversation. Okay, why did I do that? Why are we bothered by that? And I try to shift it from I to we. So I'm having a conversation with my unconscious mind instead of just saying I, because then I'm taking responsibility for it. And it's not that we shouldn't take responsibility. It's just, let's take responsibility for what is really our fault. And then let's explore what came through us and figure out how to refine it and clean it up so it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this idea of curiosity. I think that's so powerful in relationships. Curiosity about what's going on within us and what caused that trigger or that reaction, if that's what happened, and from a place of, and seeing ourselves and others from a place of innocence. I mean, that one thing could really transform things, because it's so easy for us to, when we do react to something, to assume a bad or sinister motive on the part of the other person. Even someone like, a husband or wife that you've known for years and to be a good-hearted, wonderful person. If you have a strong reaction to something or a trigger, it can feel like, or you can get to a place where it can feel like there's a sinister motive there or a bad motive there. And so starting from this place of innocence, I think, is so powerful. And then adding curiosity to that. Like Alison Armstrong says, what if no one is misbehaving, including you?
Yeah.
Right. I love that. Just looking at it from most people are doing the best they can with what they know in the moment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And if we start from that place, I think it can be really transformative.
Yeah. So, and it's hard, right? Because the unconscious mind is like, consciously we can do this, but the unconscious mind reacts so fast, and it's a snap decision that, oh, you did that because you're trying to offend me. You did that because you are, trying to get back at me, or you did that because you don't care. Eek! Oh my gosh. It's not the problem that these arise in us. It's the problem that we buy into them, that we believe them, that we get in the car and drive away with them, right? That's the problem. Yet when we look at a child and there's a tenderness in our heart for that child, whether they're being good or whether they're suffering and struggling and crying and, maybe having a hard time, like, oh, they want to go to sleep. They're just so tired and they just keep crying, right? There's a tenderness often in our heart for children, for little people. And so when we do have that tenderness, if you can sense what that feels like and turn it back on yourself, right? Or you can realize, oh, wow, that was offensive and that was hurtful. But I caught myself before I reacted. Let me take a breath and let me approach this conversation with tenderness and curiosity. Let me just ask, wow, that feels like you might be a little upset. Can you help me understand what you mean by that, or where you're coming from? Or what is it that you're seeing that is making you feel or say that, right? When we come with a sense of inquisitiveness, it opens the conversation. No judgment, just like, help me understand where you're coming from. I had a friend of mine call me one time, and he's a pretty renowned podcaster. And he called me and I was like, hey, so good to hear from you. I never get a call from you. This is amazing. This is me on the phone as soon as I pick up the phone. His immediate response to me is, I'm really upset with you. And I was like, okay, thank you for sharing that with me. What are you upset with, so that maybe we can talk about it and figure out a way to solve it? My heart didn't elevate. I didn't get angry back. I didn't fight back. I didn't want to bite back. I genuinely was curious. I was like, oh, I love this person so much. And I have so much respect and appreciation for him and our relationship, our friendship, that if he's upset, I want to go into it like, hey, man, what's going on for you? What's bothering you? How can I fix it? See, the problem is that often in relationships of all sort, we take it personally. But because often I come from a place of looking out of myself and saying, how can I help and be of service to you? When he, in essence, attacked me like that, it wasn't about me. It was about, how can I be in service to you, because you're clearly suffering, because that's not the nature of our relationship. The end result was, he chose me. A lot of people were saying something to him about his relationship, and he just wasn't committed in the relationship. And the short version is that multiple people had been saying something very similar to him about how he was showing up and not showing up in the relationship. And I was the one that he felt safe enough to reach out to him and express that anger. It was okay. Within, 12 or 15 minutes, everything was normalized again, because I asked questions, because I was inquisitive, because I was honest, because I wanted to understand where he was coming from, what was going on. I didn't take it personally, because I believe when in doubt, focus out. Why are they so upset with me? There's doubt. So let me focus out. What's going on? Why are you upset? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I do think it's worth mentioning that there are people that we can come across who truly may have bad motives and may be actually harmful for us to be around. And we have to have the ability to set boundaries and standards around those. I think what we're talking about more here are people that we have some basis of a relationship with, or desire to have a relationship with, because, unfortunately, there are some people who maybe they're truly narcissistic. I feel like that term sometimes is a bit overused right now.
Yes.
And, we're not all clinical psychologists to, do a diagnosis, but there are truly those kind of people out there, people that are harmful, and that we do have to set boundaries and standards around. But even still, when we are tapping into our own inner wisdom and our own inner guidance, we can decide and make a decision, not based on a reaction, but a response as to what the appropriate thing would be to do. I just wanted to throw that in there, because I know there might be people listening who are saying, yeah, but what about those really truly harmful people?
100%. Listen, all things are a recipe, okay? And we can make a recipe. It's going to call for certain ingredients, and at the end, it's either going to taste delicious, it's going to just be like, it's okay, or it's going to taste terrible. Some relationships are going to taste terrible, and these are the narcissistic ones. And I agree 100%. The term gets tossed around and thrown around all the time for somebody who is just disagreeing with or struggling with having their partner understand them, right? Some people are really narcissistic, but probably significantly fewer. However, I'm a big advocate of women's intuition. If you feel something awkward or off or uncomfortable about somebody, don't be resilient in that situation. Allow yourself to say, this doesn't feel comfortable and safe for me. I'm just going to remove myself from the situation. Don't even waste time, right? The very first key in having a resilient life is letting that stuff go, letting go of the things that are not going to work for you or could potentially be dangerous. So I would 100% support that. Absolutely. But if there is a relationship that you want to fix, even if it's just with yourself, you might want to be resilient enough to work your way through that. And that may require some conversation. But always, number one, first and foremost, protect yourself first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. Now, I kind of want to flip this on its head a little bit, if that's okay, PJ. I know
Let's do it.
I know
Let's get
we
crazy.
love to dance. There's always so many things I want to talk to you about once we're in a conversation. So one of the things that I think holds us back in all areas of life, and I know you can speak to this, but it certainly holds a lot of people back in their love lives. I know it did me, is fear, right?
Sure.
And fear is something, there's the acronym that says it's false evidence appearing real and all of those kinds of things. And yet our fears can feel very, very real, and they can hold us back, and they can definitely have a hold on us. And some of those things are based in things from the past, or some of those things are based on maybe what happened in the past that we might anticipate might happen in the future, like maybe rejection or disappointment or heartbreak or relationships that didn't work out or that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I want you to speak a little bit to fear, because I know you personally well enough to know you've had to push through some times of tremendous fear. Like I can remember us having the conversation when you'd been through that period of time where you couldn't even breathe. Like breathing was such a struggle. And I can't even imagine how fearful, how scary that must have been.
Yeah. It's terrifying, right? Sometimes when you can't take a breath. I was, this is going to be relevant. One of my favorite things to do is indoor skydiving. It's amazing. You just have this feeling of being able to fly and be free, and it's safe, and you're not falling 13,000 feet, through 13,000 feet of air, hopefully keeping your fingers crossed that the parachute's going to open on the way towards the bottom. So indoor skydiving is super fun. When they took me in the very first time, they took me in and they said, look, we don't know what your body type is going to do in the wind tunnel. So we're going to bring you in, set you down on the net, right? That you can walk on, or you can go horizontal and float and fly, right? So if you're vertical, you won't fly, but if you're horizontal, you will. So they said, we're going to walk you out and set you on the net and make sure that, we get a feel for what your body's going to do in the wind. And I said, yeah, okay. They brought me in, set me chest down, and, they basically were kneeling beside me, holding me down on the net, trying to figure out what was going to happen. But the problem is the wind was 4 jet engines above us, and it's an open port below you. So it sucks in all this wind and air from the outside. And it's so powerful and so strong, I couldn't exhale. I didn't know that you can suffocate if you can't exhale. I was assuming that you only suffocate if you can't inhale, but I didn't have the strength, my diaphragm, to exhale against the force of 4 jet engines above me and I literally was like starting to panic. I was afraid like I was going to pass out. I couldn't breathe. I don't know that my mind went like to the point of I'm going to die, but it went to the panic point of I can't breathe. Right. And they couldn't hear me say, you got to get me up, because I couldn't express it verbally because I couldn't push any air out of my lungs. Right. B, they had earplugs in and helmets and the sound of 4 jet engines. So they wouldn't have heard me anyway. Right. So I kept saying like, right. I'm trying to mouth the words. You got to get me up. You got to get me up. You got to get me off this mat. Right. And they're like, what? And I'm like, this is not going well. And my vision started to black out. And as my vision started to black out, like all the peripheral vision started to go and I'm like throwing my head up, like, get me up. Right. Like, really, you got to get me up. Finally, as soon as they lifted me, what happened was that there's a door in the tunnel where you enter and exit from the wind tunnel. And I think that released just enough pressure that all of a sudden I could exhale. And then I was flying, and it was beautiful, and it was easy, and it was free, and it was something I've never felt before because of the limitations of my physicality. What this means for your audience listening is there's something you are experiencing and you're not expressing yourself fully And that fear is signaling to you that something needs adjusted, right? And so for me, it was we had to create enough space with some of the wind coming out of the wind tunnel through that doorway that it allowed me to be able to exhale and breathe. Okay. So when you're experiencing fear, we have to find something to let go of. We have to recognize that, okay, I'm afraid of like being judged, or I'm afraid of being turned down. So if I walk up and talk to this person who I find attractive and I'd like to maybe go out with them once or twice and just see if there might be something here, and I'm scared. The problem is we're holding tight and fast. We're stuck on the net, right? We're being held down by that fear. And let me think, I wanted to come through me instead of from you. So give me a sec, because I'm starting to get myself tangled. Okay. So what wants to be said is that when we're in fear, we're holding fast to the what if of the future, because we may have experienced it in the past, like you said, or we may have created an idea of what could happen in the future. So we're holding on to the what if of the future, but we're only holding on to the negative. And the moment we let go of that, what all opens up? All of a sudden there's freedom, there's all kinds of choice. But if we hold fast and we're attached to that fear, we're attached to that possible outcome, we're afraid that judgment is going to be there. We're afraid that somebody is going to reject us. And so because of that, we say, well, I'm probably going to be rejected anyway, so I'm not going to do it. You're denying your own authenticity. You're not acting with integrity. You're acting out of fear. You're letting fear dictate who you are. In that moment, remember I said there are two kinds of people in the world. There are free people and there are slaves. In that moment, you're in reaction. That fear is creating a reaction. A reaction is a slave action. In that moment, you're enslaved. However, just by flipping it and saying, you know what, I'm going to let go of that. And you always have to let go of something to embrace something new. You always have to let go of something, fear in this case, or internal resistance, or the what ifs of the future, to embrace something new. And what's that new thing that you may be embracing? What if you embrace, okay, you know what, I'm afraid of rejection. Let me just set down rejection and let me embrace a real possibility of an interesting conversation. Instead of like holding on to like, well, I like them and I want them to like me too. What if I let go of, I want them to like me too? And I just embrace, I just want to see if they're an interesting person. I just want to go and have a really fascinating conversation with them, right? Because the fascinating conversation creates connection. Mm-hmm. And so when we're attached to what we want and we're afraid that the outcome is not going to give us what we want, we'll hold fast to this fear because we're afraid it's not going to happen out there. So let me stay here and be in protection mode. It's just your unconscious mind saying that could hurt, so we're going to stay here. That could embarrass you, so we're going to stay here. That could cause you problems, right? Somebody could judge you, so I'm going to stay here. I don't want to stay here. You don't want to stay here. Let this go. Let the fear go and say, you know what? Let me exchange something that is protecting me. And thank you. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be rejected. But what do I want? I'd love to see if I can have an interesting conversation, because maybe they're attractive and I get there and they're dumb as a brick. They're not even interesting. Right? Like I've literally talked to women that I found attractive. And as soon as they started talking about sports or cars, which you would stereotypically think as a dude I'd love, oh, it was terrible. Horrible. And then I found people that I thought, oh, there's no way that this person and I are ever going to be able to connect. And we started a conversation about something super deep and delicious. And I'm like, this person's amazing. So we're not going to know until we give them a shot, right? And
yeah, so true.
Give them shots, we have to let go of something. So we can choose to hold on to the fear and be attached to the fear and let it dictate and limit us. Or we can say, you know what, let me just set the fear here. I can come back for it anytime I want. Or I can just let it here and let me embrace a possibility. Let the possibility be a conversation. Let me just see if I can find something interesting with them. Let me see if they like the same kinds of things that I do. I like what they're wearing. Let me find out a little bit more about that. Like, this is an amazing outfit. What caused you to choose this today? Like, or, how does it make you feel when you dress like this? You look amazing, right? Why did you choose that color? It's so great for your skin. Whatever it is. I mean, these are just things that I'm pulling out of the top of my head right now. And probably, truthfully, because I love style and fashion. And I was watching some style YouTube videos last night. And so I think they're still stuck in my head. So I think that's where that's coming from. But the point is that I want to find a conversation. You, the people listening, want to find something that you want to exchange the fear for. What would you rather have? You can come back to the fear. But let's just make a willing exchange. Okay. You're not sacrificing anything. Fear is still going to be here if you want it. You're just making a willing exchange for something that you want more. What do you want more? What's more delicious? What's more interesting? They don't have to be massive leaps. A friend of mine last night, let me tell you one more quick story. A friend of mine has social anxiety. Kind, loving, generous, good man. But he has social anxiety. And I said, hey man, now that you've shifted your shift, because he's a nurse and he was working on weekends, I said, and this is your second weekend where you actually have weekends off. What is your plan for this weekend? He's like, well, I think I'm going to go to a bar. And I was like, what? And he said, because he doesn't even drink. He said, I think I'm going to go to a bar. And I said, a bar? You don't even drink? And he goes, well, it's more like one of those like outdoor bar eating places. And I was like, okay. I said, don't you? And we talked a little bit more. And I said, the essence of what we talked about was, buddy, that's like trying to go from 0 to 100. That's an epically difficult place to introduce yourself and meet other people, right? And he's not even trying to meet women. He's just trying to meet people and make friends. And I said, people go to a bar or a restaurant or a club with their friends, right? If you see them looking around, they're looking around to see if there's anybody else attractive that might be looking at them. But the chance of them actually walking across the bar or the restaurant and saying hello is really, really slim. And so the opportunity for you to get into a small group of people at a table or at the bar and start a conversation with them, it's really difficult. If you don't have mad charismatic skills, if you're not really great with the gift of gab, if you're not demonstrating real interest in people and great at starting conversations, if you get worried to even say hello to people, this is not the first place to start. I said, instead, why don't we just start with something simple? Why don't you find a meetup group that's doing something that you like? You love hiking, right? So let's just see if there's a place for you to go hiking. And he's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. You don't want to go from 0 to 100 and expect to be successful. You're just going to set yourself up for failure because you're afraid. Because you're afraid to actually step forward and make those social connections and make jokes and connect with people and ask them questions and be interesting and interested, right? Because you're afraid to do that, you're not going to do it. You're going to go to a bar, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Then you're just going to reflect on yourself and think, oh, I really am terrible at this. I'm never going to make friends. That's not the case at all. You just chose the wrong 0 to 100. Let's go 0 to like 1. What's one small change? What's one thing that you can exchange the fear for? That's a simple shift, a simple, well, let me just try this. Let me just make a compliment to somebody and tell them why, not just, oh, like, that's a really beautiful suit that you're wearing, but I really love that suit on you because ... Okay, so let's just take one tiny step. Okay, and then one next tiny step. And one next tiny step. Pretty soon the fear won't have any place to live because you won't need it anymore. But it's up to you, the conscious you, not up to the unconscious, to make that decision on how you want to move through your life, with fear or without fear. With fear, unconscious. Without fear, conscious and intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was so beautifully said. I love the idea of, if we're holding on so tight to fear, how can we have an open hand to receiving something different? So I love this idea of, what would I rather have instead? What would I like to exchange this fear for? Because I think that can help us to make even if they're baby steps, it can help us to make a step forward and not just hang on so tightly to this fear.
Yes, 100%.
So powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It was for me last night, it was a really valuable, important conversation for me to have with him. To be able to look at that and help him realize, oh, I'm trying to jump into an arena that I am not fit for. But I can do a meetup, right? I can make a nice compliment and tell somebody why I like that about them, right? And the compliment doesn't have to be about their dress. It could be like, you know what, you have a really nice smile. And I really appreciate it because, or you have a really, you have a really soft air about you. And I appreciate that, because in your presence, it makes you feel like I can breathe and I just feel like relaxed in your presence. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. I've never had a compliment like that before. Well, thank you. I'm the one who's experiencing the transformation in your presence. So it's really nice. I'm PJ. What's your name? Ooh, see that sneak attack. You take that next step, right? The next step by introducing yourself. Okay.
Yeah, and well, and I also think, because the majority of my audience is women, I also think it's worth noting that men have told me, and you can back me up on this, that they don't always get a lot of acknowledgement or a lot of compliments. Maybe with men, there tends to be more of a competitive nature, so they're maybe not, that's more the hey dude on the back or whatever, than paying each other or really acknowledging the deeper qualities of each other or paying each other compliments. Maybe more evolved men like you do are good at that, but I think a lot of men maybe are not. And so men have told me that they don't get a lot of compliments. A lot of men have told me they don't get a lot of acknowledgement, appreciation, or compliments. And so when a woman notices something like that about them, a nice smile or a nice demeanor or a nice presence, it made me think of this man that I used to know years ago, back when I was single, and I would attend sometimes these singles events and parties and see this one man there from time to time. And he and I never dated, but we became friends. I actually dated his roommate a little bit, but he had this presence. I mean, when he walked in the room, there was just, the way he carried himself. He was a very tall man, but he just carried himself with a lot of dignity and class, and always was groomed very nicely. And I said, I said to him a few times, I said, you just have this demeanor that looks like you have a really important and significant presence. I said, I think I'm going to call you president, because you look like you should be the president of something.
I love
right.
that.
So then I would see him and I'd say, hey, president. And he kind of blushed, but he would just light up. I mean, I could tell he just loved this. Right. And this was, I wasn't necessarily trying to date him, because like I said, I dated his roommate a bit, which would have been a little weird, but we were friends, and it just made him feel so good. That's just a really simple thing. But it was something that I noticed about him that was true. I was paying a sincere compliment to him, and he loved it. He ate it up.
I'm actually glad you told that story, because it sparked something in my brain that I think is really important, right? He is showing up with his presence. And because of that kind of presence, he probably experienced significantly less self-doubt. It doesn't mean he didn't have self-doubt. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have fear in other areas. But in some areas, he felt very confident, and that was conveyed non-verbally by the feeling and the way he moved his body, which is beautiful. And I love that. And if you are a lady or a gentleman who might be watching this, if you are a lady and you are afraid in some way, because circling back to our conversation about fear, if you're afraid of being rejected, or you're afraid of what somebody might say, or whatever the fear is that's holding you back, the problem is you don't have the confidence that you want to actually move forward. So we can let go of the fear, or we can look at the root and go, okay, hold on. Why do I feel like I'm lacking confidence? Where am I confident? Where do I feel secure? The moment I say, where am I confident? It assumes that I'm confident in some area. When I said those words right now, I said, okay, where am I confident? Inside, I don't know if you could see it, but it was real subtle. Like I lifted myself up even more. I felt lighter. I felt confident inside. I felt stronger. I felt more focused and more intentional. Like I want to use the word precise. I felt more precise in my intention. Let me say it that way. I felt more precise in my intention. And all I said was, where am I more confident? Where am I confident? What areas of my life am I confident in? And all of a sudden, when I did that, everything settles inside of me. The fear disappears. And what is my brain focused on? Where am I confident? But if I'm like, oh, I'm so afraid, what am I focused on? Oh, I'm so afraid, right? What do you want to focus on? Because what you pour your attention into is what's going to manifest for you.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that was good. What you pour your attention into is going to manifest for you.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a
Awesome.
perfect segue to something I want to talk to you about too,
Okay, cool.
which is first of all, I just want to acknowledge what you just said there. That was really powerful because I do believe that our minds and our thoughts are so incredibly, incredibly powerful. And connecting to that place, those places where we do feel more confident. And sometimes it's from the inside out, and sometimes it helps from the outside in. I mean, the way this man dressed and the way he carried himself, you know, like this was part of who he was, but I'm sure that made him feel more confident inside. And so, you know, it kind of goes both ways, I guess. But what I wanted to talk to you about was this idea and explore this a little deeper. And this goes right along with what you just said of focusing our mind and our attention, our thoughts and our words into what we do want rather than what we don't want. Because I believe that when we are thinking thoughts, you know, if they're thoughts of fear and doubt and lack and scarcity, which are common thoughts for people to have if they've been struggling in their love life for a long period of time, or thoughts of rejection. You know, I've known people who are afraid to even actually get to a point of going on a date because they're so sure and so afraid that they're going to be rejected that they, you know, they sabotage the process before they even get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that when we're thinking those kinds of thoughts, what we're doing is we're actually creating more of the same. I believe that we're in the creative process based on our thoughts and our words. So I always encourage my clients and women that I work with to speak into and think into what they do want and not what they don't want. And like when they're writing their profiles, when I'm helping them write their dating profiles, speaking into what they do want, the vision of what they do want, what they would like to co-create with someone, rather than if you're such and such, no need to apply. You know, you see those things in profiles. And so I just would like to explore this idea with you a little bit. Do you resonate with that? Do you believe that we're actually creating with our thoughts and with our words, and we want to speak into it, think into what we do want to create?
Yes, I say it slightly different now when I'm talking about resilience, but I do believe that. And here's how I put it slightly differently. You're always committed to something, right? Resilience is born from commitment. So you're either going to be resilient for something like fear your attachment to trauma. No, I can't let this go. I'm going to be resilient no matter what you try to do to take it away from me. I'm going to hold fast to this trauma and this sadness and this fear and this sense of unworthiness. Or you can commit to what you're talking about is the confidence, what you have to offer, the value that you're going to bring and the value that you're looking for, right? What specifically are you looking for that you want? And so when you're committed to that, you look for those kinds of features in a particular person. And when they don't show up, you're able to say, oh, well, these are the things I'm looking for and they're not there because they're top of mind. So if resilience is born from commitment and you commit to these things that you want in a partner and in a relationship, then you won't allow yourself to accept less than that because you'll be resilient. Nope, this is my focus. Nope, this is my commitment, right? And so what you're saying is because of that, you create this for yourself. Excuse me. You create this for yourself, but but's the wrong word. Commitment, creation, right? Commitment is you won't accept less. Creation is because you won't accept less. The creation comes during the process of creating what you want. It's the resilience gives you the space to be creative. And so those are both super important aspects, and we're saying the same thing. There is one thing that you said that I think I'm going to forget it. I'm going to try to remember. When you're helping people create their profiles and saying what it is that they want, I think it's important that we look at what we want. A, number one, what do we want? And then B, we say, okay, now, how do I get it? Right? And how do I get it may mean I want these kinds of characteristics and qualities in a partner. Now, how do I become the person that's attractive to that kind of person that I want? How do I ensure that I'm becoming this person that is the equal of what I want?
Mm-hmm.
Because so many times people, and guys are terrible at this. I know most of your listeners and viewers are ladies, but guys are notoriously terrible at this. Guys will notoriously say, oh, I want a model and she has to, like sex, and all my friends have to love her, and she has to like that I like sports, and all these crazy things. But then they don't do anything to shift their own psychology or their own behaviors to actually be a man who nurtures an intimate relationship and creates deep connection with her, so that she feels like, oh, I'm getting everything that I need and I want from this relationship. So let me also continue to support. So I just want to make sure that when we identify all the things that we want, we also look at, okay, now how do I get to be to actually nurture that kind of relationship and that kind of person?
Yeah, and I think that really comes back to our whole overall conversation here, PJ, is the commitment to being that highest and best self, and to look at what the areas within ourselves that might need a little bit of cleanup work, clean up on aisle 7, whatever. And recognize, while still doing it with that self-compassion that we talked about, recognizing that we're all human, we're all works in progress, we're all continuing to grow. And I agree, your point is so important, because I do think there does tend to be a tendency out there for us to focus on what we want and not as much of a focus on who we are and who we want to become in order to invite that into our lives. So I think our whole conversation blends beautifully into that idea. And I think it is so important. I just believe that with, everything that we create in our lives, it's created first in our minds and in our hearts. It's like if you set an intention to be an author, to write a book, that's something that's created first in our minds and our hearts before it becomes a reality in the real world. And it's like, so this is why I say I believe we're in the creative process when we're creating in our minds and in our hearts, through our thoughts and through our words.
Yeah.
And these other things that we've been talking about, the fears, the doubts, the lack of worthiness, the things from the past holding us back, those kinds of things are what can hold us back. But I just think it's empowering, comes back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation, to remember that we have choice. And sometimes we really forget how much choice we have in terms of our own lives. And it's empowering for us to remember that.
I think it's important also to remember, in support of that just because you're making some transformations, letting go of things that don't work and embracing the new, that doesn't mean that you're not being true. If you look at your own authenticity and you say, who am I as a person? How do I really want to show up? Not like how am I partially committed to showing up, but fully committed to who you really want to grow into, then you're not becoming somebody fake. You're not pretending, you're not faking it to make it. You're not trying to put on a mask and be somebody you're not. You're actually saying, no, this is who I really am. And this is how I want to show up, because I want to keep being who I am. I like who I am. And I want this quality in my relationship. And if you are in a place where you're like, oh, well, let's use weight as an example, because it's something that we have much more control over. Clothing style, hairstyle, we can do these kinds of things too. If you know that you want a particular relationship and you're like, oh, I'm willing to show up in all these ways personally, but you're not willing to change the way you dress, or you're not willing to change your hairstyle, or you're not willing to adjust your weight, maybe put on weight if you're super skinny, or maybe lose a little if you feel like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. If you really feel like you're not where you want to be, there's a piece in there that's saying, I'm not being true to myself. But what happens is there's there's this little trick that happens in the brain and in our society that says, no, they should love me for who I am. Yeah, of course, 100% they should love you for who you are. But are you really being who you really are? Or are you allowing part of your brain to not let you be like all that you really truly can be? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like, oh, they should love me for who I am, and this is a random thing, right? Let me just stick with weight because it seems to be such a big deal, especially for women.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If there's this idea that, well, they should love me for who I am. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely 100%. Don't deny that at all. But if there's a part of you that says they should love me for who I am, so I don't have to make the change, become healthier because I don't have the resilience or the internal drive or the personal willpower or the strength or just simply the know-how. I just don't know how to change. And I understand that there's some body types that are just built in a particular way. I get that. That's not what I'm saying. Like if you see me, I'm a tiny, skinny little dude, 4 feet tall in my wheelchair, crazy curvature in my spine, and wicked skinny. So, there's nothing that I can do about that necessarily. But I can, continue to do to push my wheelchair as much as I can. So I maintain a particular physical independence because I don't want to lean on somebody to always have to push me. Mm-hmm. Right. So I want to make sure that I can walk with somebody instead of being pushed. 95% of the time, they're probably going to push me because I'm not going to push slow. But there are going to be times when I need to walk by myself so that she knows that I'm with her, not dependent upon her. And so it's the same with weight. Like if there's something inside of you that's like, oh, well, they should accept me for who I am. And that means that I don't have to make any modifications or transform in any way. And I'm not trying to this is such a dangerous zone and area for me to talk about, but I'm not talking about the weight. I'm talking about the psychology, right? I'm talking about becoming the person that you really internally at your authenticity know who you are. And when we're not living the way that we can, we're not in integrity. And so we want other people to accept us for where we are. But what we're asking people to do is accept us for less than who we really are. I don't want that for any of your audience. I don't want that for anybody. I don't want you to ever be less than who you really, truly at your core are. Are you living the way that you want to live? Are you as kind as you want to be? Are you as spiritual as you want to be? Are you as making the money that you want to make? Are you as connected with people as you want to be? And my friend that I talked to you about a moment ago, who has social anxiety, he is absolutely not in a place where he wants to be. He doesn't have any friends, right? And he says, he's like, he could say, well, people just have to accept me for who I am. Or he could look at himself and say, this is my fault. I'm not reaching out and trying to make friends with people that are like me, that I feel safe with. So he's in this state where he's like, okay, I'm going to do something scary. So scary. He's trying to go from 0 to 100 by going to a bar, the most difficult and notoriously, the most difficult place for you to actually meet somebody. It's and he's not a drinker, but a terrible place to go. Right. And so we're just pulling back and just saying, well, what can you do that gets you to be the person that you want to be? Does that make sense? I hope that I'm not offensive to anybody. That's not my intention at all. I'm just saying that we want to look at ourselves. And I've said this with you before. And I say this to myself, and I say this to my own clients, and I say this when I'm on stage. You want to look at yourself and say, am I living with the highest level of integrity? Meaning that authenticity is an action and emotion. Or am I authentic inside of my heart, but I'm not living with it outside because something is slowing me down or stopping me? Fears, worries, doubt, laziness, not knowing how, fear of judgment, whatever it is, what is stopping you from being authentic? If you look at yourself and go, you know what, I'm not being authentic. This is not who I really am. I don't like this part about me. Whether it's style of dress, right? Like before we started recording, he said, oh, look at your hairstyle, right? Look at that. I like it. Very nice of you. I hated what was going on top of my head. I had a big bald spot, gray hair on the sides and the back, super thin on the top and gone in the top center. I hated it. So I had to get the courage. To shave my head because I was scared that as skinny as I am and as small as I am and as awkwardly shaped as I am and in this wheelchair, shaving my head, and I don't mean to be offensive, but I was afraid people would think that I was going through chemotherapy, right? And I don't want people to think that. Don't want people to say, oh, look at that poor guy. He must be going through chemo. But the moment I said, you know what, I'm committed to this because I really don't like what's going on. And this is not, I'm trying to pretend like I'm not like losing my hair. And it's awkward and weird and uncomfortable, whether I'm talking to another guy or whether I'm talking to a lady that I might be interested in. I always felt less than. And so I just said, you know what, I got to shave my head and give it a shot. The moment I shaved my head, literally the moment, I wasn't even out of the shower yet. And I felt 4 times more confident because it wasn't something I'd try to hide. How can I hide it? People push my wheelchair from behind. They're going to look down and they're going to see the bald spot. I can't hide that. But now it's conscious and it's intentional. And I'm wearing this with intentionality. I feel 4 times as confident as I did before. Would I love to have my long blonde hair back from college? Yeah, of course. Is it ever going to happen? Probably not. And that's okay, because it would probably be more difficult for me to handle now. And I'd have to have somebody else help me. This is clean and easy. And you know what else is clean and easy? Living with integrity, living with authenticity, really looking at yourself and saying, this is the person I want to be to attract the person I want to be with, to create the love and relationship that I want, that I deserve.
Beautiful. Yeah, I sometimes think of this as standing in our true identity. It's maybe another way of saying authenticity, but what is our true identity? What really feels true and right and authentic and real for you? Because what often makes us relatable and even lovable is being real, because it makes other people have the ability to feel comfortable to be real. And that's where we really connect on that heart level rather than just on who we're pretending to be. And by saying that, I'm not saying that we don't want to be our best selves. I mean, hopefully our true identity is that we do care about our own health and we do care about our own appearance, and we don't all have to look like supermodels, but that's that's still our true identity. Like you said, we're not asking people to love and accept us for less than who we really are, because we're standing in our true identity. I don't know if I'll do this justice at all, but in James Clear's wonderful book, Atomic Habits, one of the things that he talks about is, you know, when you're talking about the weight thing, it made me remember this. It's like he's saying, if you identify as a healthy, fit person who takes care of their body, then what actions is that going to inspire? So he talks about taking the identity of what you want, the direction you want to go. Even if you're not in that situation at the moment, then you start asking yourself the questions, what would a fit, healthy person taking care of their body choose to eat for lunch today? What would a healthy, fit person taking care of their body choose in terms of getting exercise or getting sleep or caring better for themselves? And I believe when we start aligning with those things, we also tend to attract other people who are more in alignment, and hence that increases the opportunity for us to have connection and a more evolved kind of a relationship.
100%. This is so amazing. I love this, right? This is my 0 to 100 metaphor that I've been referencing. Is often I talk about, you want to raise your standards, right? You raise your standards for yourself. You want to raise your standards for other people. But the problem is that's 100. And what James is suggesting in his book, he's suggesting, hey, why don't we just ask ourselves a few questions? Doesn't mean we have to follow through, but what would a person who really values health and fitness, what would they have for lunch? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Nowhere in there does he say that you have to have that for lunch. What will happen though is that the more you look at that, the more it becomes really easy to make decisions that are beneficial for you. And you know what it does? It just simply comes back to commitment. Remember, I always say the first key is letting that crap go. So letting go of the attachment, I always get whatever to eat, right? And the second key for me in terms of becoming resilient is commit fully. So when you commit fully, all of a sudden you go, oh, well, a healthy person would eat this, and I want to be a healthy person. I'm committed to that. So I'm resilient. I'm resilient against the unhealthy foods or the unhealthy choices. And so anytime, and this happens in my life all the time, I can be completely at home by myself, and I'll have this conversation, and it'll shift, and I'll go, nope, I'm really glad that I'm making this decision. I could order food, but I'm really glad that I'm making the decision to eat what I have in the refrigerator today because it's healthier. Because it's healthier, and I know that after I eat it, I'm going to be glad that I ate it. And as soon as I make that decision, before I even eat, I just feel better because I'm not being enslaved by the desire of, oh, I want this crazy, amazing food from this restaurant. I'm making a conscious decision. I'm choosing freedom, and I'm getting the benefits from choosing freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful.
I love talking to you because here's why. I know I interrupted you. Please forgive me. I just get so excited. I love talking to you because you're a deep thinker, and you care about your audience, and you love your audience, and you want the best for them. And we have some wonderful conversations. And, listen, I get excited, and I want people to go from 0 to 100, but I understand we got to go 0 to 0.5. And that's good enough. That's good enough. 0 to 0.5, right? And here's the thing. Key number one, again, I'm going to circle back to my resilience. Key number one is let that stuff go. Let the attachments go. Step number two, or I like to call them keys because they unlock things for you, is commit fully. And the third key is get excited about your upcoming or your next challenge. I don't like to call them problems. I don't like to call them issues. Get excited about your next challenge. So the next challenge is, okay, this is a challenge. What am I going to choose to eat for lunch? I'm excited about this. I'm excited that I'm going to choose to eat this for lunch, and it's going to feel amazing because I accomplished something that's important to me, that I accomplished something that means something at the deeper core, the soul of me. And when you start choosing health in any aspect, whether that's working on this stuff from your past, or whether that's choosing physical health by the way you eat and exercise, or whether it's financial health or social health, it doesn't matter to me, or relationship health, it doesn't matter. When you choose health, and you get excited about it, even though you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but I'm excited to try. All of a sudden, the dopamine releases in your brain, and you're motivated. It's super easy. Dopamine may feel good, but dopamine is more accurately associated with motivation. So if you're struggling with motivation, committing fully, it may be hard to follow through because you're not actually fully committed. You're partially committed, you're mostly committed, but are you fully committed? But then when you get excited, boom, it just takes it to the next level. It's easy. When I jumped out of a plane the first time, and I mean, it's a longer story, but when the jump instructor that I was attached to yelled, pull, I didn't realize my butt was going to continue to fly as fast as it was going. My butt was going to fly faster than my feet. As soon as he yelled pull, he pulled the parachute, my feet, my brand new baby blue Skechers, came flying up and almost kicked me right in the nose. Right, stopped right here, and then fell back down, and I fell out of my harness. I didn't fall completely out to the ground, but my butt slipped out of the harness, and the harness was now around my knees. And listen, you don't understand commitment until you're faced with life and death. And when you think you're being committed, you can always be more committed. And when I had to hold on as tight as I could with my arms, the little tiny strength that I had pulling my arms into my body when he was swinging us around, creating all this centrifugal force. You think, well, why didn't you ask the guy to help you get back in your harness? Because we didn't have good communication right from the beginning. So he didn't know about my body, and I wasn't sure he could hear me. And I was afraid that if he tried to help, he might make it worse. And so I thought, I got to depend on myself. You don't know how committed you can be until you're faced with life and death. And I know you're not facing life and death scenarios and situations right now, and that's okay. But there are people and things in your life that are important to you. And I would ask you, are you fully committed? Or are you mostly committed? Because mostly committed is not going to get you there, right? And what helps you is just get excited about the next challenge. You get excited about your next challenge. All of a sudden, it doesn't feel like there's resistance. Right? Because there's not resistance, the motivation from the dopamine dump in your brain, that from that excitement drives you forward towards what it is that you want. It makes the decision so easy. Everything changes. Get excited for your next challenge.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. I think that's a really great place for us to start to wrap. I do want to give you a chance to This will air at the beginning of the new year. And I
Ta-da.
think that's a really fantastic time for us to think about committed. Like I loved when you said you're always committed to something. What a profound thought. So thinking about what you are committed to, what you're committed to in terms of who you want to be, what you want to do, who you want to attract, the kinds of opportunities you want to create for yourself, the way you're wanting to move forward in your life, thinking about what are you committed to, how committed are you, and you're always committed to something. What is it? Is it what you want to be committed to? I love that thought. So I want to give you a chance to first tell everyone about the free gift. And like I said, that will be in the description below and also in the video description, in the link below and then the video description. And then leave us with whatever final thoughts you want to leave us with.
Okay. So, as Michelle said early in the conversation, I've had the very rare opportunity and pleasure to be interviewed by Michelle, I think 7 or 8 times. And it's been an honor every single time. And at some point, I created an ebook that's, I think, 117 pages. I used to say 109. I went back to look at it. I think it's actually like 117, something like that. 170. It's basically a book. It is a book. It's just an ebook. And it's called 5 Ways to Date Yourself and One Big Reason Why You Should. 5 Ways to Date Yourself and One Big Reason Why You Should. So Michelle has the link that she'll make available to you. And you just click the link. It'll open up into a Google Drive and just download it. It's just a PDF and it's filled with 5 different categories and like 15 different dates that you can take yourself on while you start to discover your true your identity, as James talks about in his book, or your authenticity, as I say. And Michelle, what do you call it? Your
true identity. Standing in your true identity.
Standing in your true identity. So you say the same thing, okay? So standing in your true identity, it gives you a chance to really look and go, wait, this is who I really am. This is what I really like or don't like. And here are the reasons why. Okay, that'll make the kinds of people and the quality of people that that you attract and are attracted to you. It'll make them much more aligned with who you are because you'll be standing in your authenticity. You'll be acting from integrity. Oh, and then so is there a comment for me? One last thing you said. Give me 1 sec. Never cease to love yourself compassionately and innocently and tenderly. Because when you do, you will liberate that to be shared with others. And you will know that you're operating with integrity because you'll be coming from a place that's genuinely and truly authentic. So never hesitate to love yourself and be innocent with yourself and tender towards yourself.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful and so important. So important. I have loved our conversation as always, PJ. It's been such a privilege and honor to have you with me again. Thank you for sharing so generously and from the heart. I always feel such a connection from the very first time we met, from the very first time you and I had the opportunity to connect, which has now been quite a few years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. I've just felt such a connection to you and just think you're just a beautiful human being and a great presence for good in the world. And it's really a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it too. And I love you a ton. You're amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And everybody out there, follow Michelle because she changes lives.
Oh, thank you, PJ. Thanks everybody for watching and tuning in with us. We wish you all the best. Love and blessings to all of you. And feel free to leave a comment below about what stood out for you or what you're committed to in your lives. We'd love to hear from you. And we're so glad we had the opportunity to connect. Thanks for watching. And thanks again, PJ.
Thanks. Bye-bye.